Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., Bloomberg's weekly podcast about Elon Musk. It's Tuesday, July 30th. I'm your host, Max Chapkin, filling in for David Papadopoulos. We've had another crazy news week here in the world and in Elon land, nowhere near as much as in Elon Musk's own X feed. In the space of a few days, he's made headlines by sharing a doctored video of Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic nominee, doing some mild vaccine skepticism, calling Harris an extinctionist, engaging in a little light feuding with California Governor Gavin Newsom. What is behind this crazy blitz of all over there tweets? Does it matter? To discuss this, we're going to be joined by Sarah Frier, who runs big tech coverage for Bloomberg, and Kurt Wagner, Bloomberg social media reporter. Sarah, Kurt, thanks for coming to Elon Inc.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, Max.
And later, we'll share another conversation as part of our one-on-one series of summer chats. Today's is between Bloomberg's Elon Musk reporter, Dana Hull, and Mike Isaac, who is a tech reporter at the New York Times. And they're going to be talking about Elon's move from California to Texas and the complicated relationship he has with his former state. Okay, where to start? Why don't we just tell me what happened the last few days on X? Kurt?
Sure. Well, you kind of highlighted some of the stuff, but it's basically been a stream of consciousness from Elon to his, nearly 200 million followers, right? The big thing, as you pointed out, was this deepfake video of Kamala Harris, who's now running against Donald Trump, who obviously Elon has endorsed, who he's donated money to. X has policies against sharing, manipulated media, synthetic media, stuff that can be misleading. And yet here he is not only sharing it, it hasn't been flagged in the way that the policy claims it should be flagged. And, as we've talked about on this podcast for months now, sort of just continued to push into this move toward the political right and using his, position atop this very, very publicly facing company to, beat certain narratives and storylines into existence. And so we've seen that time and again over the last several days.
But just to set some context, I'm just going to play a quick snip of this video just so people have a sense of what it sounds like.
I, Kamala Harris, and your Democrat candidate for president, because Joe Biden finally exposed his senility at the debate. Thanks, Joe. I was selected because I am the ultimate diversity hire. I'm both a woman and a person of color. So if you criticize anything I say, you're both sexist and racist. I may not know the first thing about running the country, but remember, that's a good thing.
So what you hear in this video is it looks like a Kamala Harris campaign ad. It actually includes many of the shots from her ad, but then it has these kind of like over-the-top lines. Joe Biden exposed his senility in the debate. Joe taught me rule number one, carefully hide your total incompetence. Sarah, this is obviously a parody, right? Or is it somewhere in between a parody? I understand that there's something troubling here, but
that's the Musk argument, is that it's a parody. But last time I checked, he took the parody label off of it. And all of the tech companies have committed to labeling their deepfakes. Otherwise, they could be in violation of federal election laws. And so, as Kurt said, it goes against the policies. But I think the humor defense is one we're going to see more and more. If something makes Musk laugh, then he's going to allow it. And if something makes Musk mad, he's going to ban it. What's going to happen now is every single thing that Musk does in favor of Trump, people are going to say he's putting his finger on the scale. Every single thing he does that seems to hurt Kamala, whether it's warranted or not, people are going to say he's putting his fingers on the scale. And whatever happens in this election, whoever wins, people are going to blame or credit Elon Musk for having some part in it. So I think he's playing a dangerous game, because that is going to really affect his business interests, his public likability, which he seems to care about, his alliances.
So wait, just Kurt, just to back up, you talked about, you and Sarah both brought up terms of service. I mean, there are also like legal questions here even about a post like this. What exactly is the violation here? It's like an election interference thing, or what's going on here?
Well, I'll speak more to the terms of service just because I know those better than I understand maybe the law around sharing something like this. But there is a manipulated media policy, misleading media, and I pulled it up actually so I can read it to you. And, it says that anything that violates this policy will either be labeled or removed if it significantly and deceptively alters or manipulates or fabricates a video or post, right? And so I'm looking at the post right now. It has 132 million views. There's no label that I can see. Elon obviously shared it directly. And you would think at the very least, given the environment we're in, a responsible thing to do would at least be to label it, right? Maybe it is parody. You don't have to take it down. It's funny. Some people will find it very funny. But to not label it at all, I think AI is getting good enough that we're hovering in this territory where people don't know immediately whether it's true or not. They watch it and they say, "Oh, did she say this stuff or not?" And the mere fact that people can't say with definitive clarity right off the bat, I think is a sign that this is something that's been manipulated to deceive people.
One thing that might be even more dangerous than this. I'm not quite sure if this manipulated media is a deep fake or not. That question, it's that if something real happens, say one of these candidates actually winning the election, people are going to look at that content too and say, oh, that must be fake. That must be a lie as well. So it's not just that the fun and games on the internet are getting out of hand. Is that the fun and games on the internet can color the way people perceive real facts, real events. And we already saw that with the Trump assassination attempt.
Just for the record, Mr. Reagan USA, the guy who originally, as I understand, created this video or assembled this video, in his message, he wrote Kamala Harris campaign ad, and then in all caps, parody. Elon did the laughing while crying emoji and said, "This is amazing." So again, it shows you just how easy it is for the context to sort of fall away, and then there are 132 million views, and we see this over and over again, both with AI stuff and with just general weird memes and jokes that many people take seriously. Do we think that this is going to be like the AI election in the same way, Sarah, that 2016 was like the Facebook Russia misinformation election? Is that what we're sort of heading towards?
Well, I think there's actually a bigger factor in this election, which is the way the platforms are designed to surface content that piques people's interests rather than surfacing content from their friends and family. So one thing that made misinformation from Russia so powerful in the 2016 election is because it was being shared by people your crazy uncle, your friend from high school, people that you think this person might know something that I don't, and I trust them. And this is different. This is an era where all of the social platforms have decided that your friends and family aren't creating enough content to be entertaining. And in order to boost engagement, they are instead putting the weight on that which you will view based on your interests. So that's created this game on the internet of let me just do whatever content will surface to the top, will win TikTok's algorithm, will win X's algorithm. And that's what we're seeing in this election. So this is the popularity contest for memes election. Everything is being memeified.
So there are moments when, as we all do, we all follow Elon Musk's posts on X, closely, where you just see him kind of going on tilt. And I mean, the last few days, this Harris thing happened amid, basically a swirl of just crazy stuff. I hit some of these at the top. I mean, he's gone on and on and on about Google. It feels like a dozen tweets about suggesting that Google is covering up the assassination attempt of Donald Trump, which I don't think is true. He's accused Meta of covering up that assassination attempt. He's been doing anti-vax memes. Last night, he was beefing with the Pope. He was going after His Holiness. Guys, what is going on?
I don't know how he's got any time left to run his companies. And I'm sure that that's what a lot of the a lot of the people who work with him are thinking. I mean, he must just spend his waking hours glued to his phone and like completely distracted.
I can't speak to what's literally going on in his personal life over the past week, but Max, we've seen this kind of spiral on Twitter before, right? And oftentimes it's associated with late nights. He drinks energy drinks. There's been reports, obviously, of him delving into other substances. I think it's also a social thing, right? I imagine he posts something. He starts to see that feedback from his base of fans. Maybe his friends are texting him, right? So my guess is with this kind of thing, first of all, he realizes it's a huge moment, right? Biden steps down, Harris steps in. He's out. He's now publicly out for Trump.
Yeah, it's time to strike. The iron's hot. Get the memes out.
He's an attention guy. He's running a platform that's driven by attention. So I'm sure part of this is calculated business decision, right? The more he's posting about this crazy stuff, the more it draws attention to X and the things that he cares about. But I also just think we don't know, but we can say that historically, these types of moments for him have been driven by things happening behind the scenes in his personal life as well.
Well, he also may be trying to change the subject from something that happened very in the open in his personal life just a couple of weeks ago.
True. Yeah.
He gave an interview with Jordan Peterson, who's a sort of figure that is closely followed by men on the internet.
He's a men's rights guy. Yeah. Yeah. He's all about masculinity, that Jordan Peterson.
He went on with Jordan Peterson and dead named his child, who is now an adult. And dead name is when someone is transgender and you call them by their former name. Essentially said that they are dead to me. That was a really sad moment on the internet, and he did get a lot of sympathy from people who have similar views to him on X. But then his kid on Threads, the Revel platform, came out with a thread. Vivian came out with a thread of how she felt that he was a absent father and had no inkling of, what it was like to go through life being her.
And it was, pretty brutal, not just calling to Musk's obvious transphobia, but his just the weird way that he's used his children and continues to use his children as totems. And I mean, it just was brutal. She owned him on Threads. I just want to hit one more thing on X quickly, which was this profile, really, honestly, a delightful profile of Linda Yaccarino, one of our favorites, not a friend of the pod, but in my imagination, a friend of the pod, who is having obviously a very difficult time managing Elon Musk, managing X. It seems like she came into this situation thinking like she had a really cool media job. This is one of the biggest social media properties. And her boss just continues to undermine her.
Yeah, I mean, I read that story and thought of all the conversations we have had on this very podcast, right? About what is her job? Her job is to try to build X's business in the face of a CEO or an owner, who's actively working against her, right? And I think that was the ultimate sort of theme of this story, which is she goes out and tries to land a great content deal. Elon comes behind her and dismantles it. She goes out and tries to tell advertisers, hey, we're a safe space to spend money. Elon comes out and immediately does something that feels unsafe, right? And so I think the shocking thing to me was that you get to the end of the story and you think how many punches can this person take before they finally say, wow, this job stinks?
Sarah, how long does Linda have at X?
What did we say when she started? We predicted 6 weeks. And that was the pattern. He was firing people left and right. She was opportunistic, but she still had a chance in those early days of the job. She could have said, hey, this is beyond what I signed up for. Elon did this thing that finally crossed my line. I'm out of here. And she didn't do that. She's here. Maybe I'll go with the prediction that she gave herself, which was 9 years.
Oh my gosh.
Didn't she say 9 years?
Kurt, what do you got here? What's your bet?
Well, I hope I'm far off this beat in the next 9 years. That's what I gotta say. If I'm writing about Linda leaving 9 years from now, then somebody come get me. Look, I think I said less than a year. I don't know if I said it publicly. I certainly thought less than a year. We've now crossed that threshold. And to the point I just made, she seems to still be going strong and not only supporting Elon, but like getting rid of other allies, right? She fired Joe Benaroche, who was like her right-hand man just a month ago or so, someone she brought over from NBC with her. And it sort of felt like, okay, she clearly picked her side here, right? She took the side of Elon over this person who's defended her both privately and publicly for years. And so I'll give her, I don't know, I'll give her another year at this point, because clearly what has she not been able to endure? Like, I don't know, the election could be quite a challenging and trying kind of process for everybody, but we'll see how they get through that. If she makes it through the election, gosh, sure, 9 years, Sarah. You have fun writing that story when she eventually leaves.
All right, let's leave it there. I will let Kurt and Sarah get back to the meme playground, and we will move on to our interview with Mike Isaac. Kurt, Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Yep, thanks, Max.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, now we're going to California. This is the state, of course, where Elon Musk made his first fortune and where he became an icon, kind of a mascot for Silicon Valley genius. California made Elon in some sense, but he also hates the place, or at least seems to hate the place. And of course, in 2020, he moved himself with great fanfare to Texas. There are a bunch of conflicting emotions going on here with Elon's relationship with his former state. You've got politics, policy, money, kind of vibes, where he feels like he fits in. And to explore all that, we've got one of our favorite tech reporters, Mike Isaac of the New York Times, who is an expert in extremely controversial CEOs. Mike wrote a book on Uber's Travis Kalanick. It's called Super Pump, also was adapted into a Showtime series. He sat down with our own Dana Hull earlier this month. This was before, I have to say, Elon declared that he was moving one of his businesses from California to Texas in response to a law protecting transgender kids. They had a really great conversation about Elon's place in Silicon Valley and, let's just say, the unusual things that CEOs sometimes say to their employees. Here's that conversation.
Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you've covered Silicon Valley and its personalities for a long time. When did you first become aware of Elon, and in what context?
He's always been sort of in the ether for me, but I think one of the biggest encounters I had with him was at, I think it was still called the All Things D conference. Elon had come to a few of their conferences, and I believe in 2014 he came to it. And it was this interesting time because a few years ago, Steve Jobs had died. I think folks were looking for this next sort of tech scion person to inspire them. Jobs was always this sort of big personality who would also go to that stage and do it. I remember Elon being on stage and the entire room was enraptured by this guy, right? He has this interesting halting way of speaking, but I think it comes off as contemplative, and then he would say these crazy things about Mars or rockets, and everyone in the audience was just hanging on every word. And this one tech VC guy, Shervin Pishavar, stands up and you are basically the heir to Steve Jobs for us. You're the next guy, right? He sort of says what I think a lot of people were thinking at that point. And I had not really paid attention to him. He had been in the ether. I'd seen him in the Iron Man movie. That was the extent of my encounters of really caring about him. I knew he had some affiliations with PayPal, which are often in dispute or talked about, I guess is what I would say. But that was when he was really probably put on my radar.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. The sort of Jobs dies, Elon rises, while the Model S is coming out. It was really interesting timing. And I think now about how much the tech press had a lot to do with this narrative of Elon being the new Steve Jobs. And and Musk is very much a marketer. But what do you think about that comparison, that he is the new Steve or was the new Steve? I don't even know if that still holds up. If the media was looking for an heir apparent, why did Elon fill that role? Was it just because of the products?
Jobs was this huge figure who I never met or knew him personally, but came off as this sort of dreamer type, right? If you look at all the marketing and all of his pitches from back then, it was never just technology. It was the intersection of technology and liberal arts, right? There was tech with a purpose. They wanted to combine it with these
calligraphy and cool fonts and all that kind of stuff.
Totally. It was very artistic. It was never just sort of like tech for tech's sake is what I would say. There was purpose behind it, and I think people liked that. I think people felt good about that. And him dying left a real vacuum, I think, in personalities. Elon is a showman, but I think also the sort of dreamer aspect of him really touches on something that I think people like. I think that technologists like, and I think that like people who aren't technologists but might want to be like that.
And do you feel like people understand that early history? Like if I go to a party and people are like, where did Elon Musk come from? I'm like, well, like he was involved in PayPal, and before that he did X.com, and now he's come full circle with calling this whole thing X. But I still feel like if you look at the narrative of his life, like those early .com days when he was here in the 90s and supposedly dropped out or didn't actually go to Stanford, like that early history is still not super well known. I mean,
no, I totally agree. And like even as I was looking back through a bunch of the history before we were talking, and just as I started having to think about Elon more, as he's become a more important figure in a lot of the things that we write about and things that we don't write about, I've had to challenge some of the assumptions that I've had. I was like, oh yeah, he created PayPal. And then folks would be like, actually, that is not as cut and dry as you would think. Like there's a bunch of different sort of backstabbing and cutting out and people claiming credit for X, Y, and Z. All the way back to, did he go to this college? Does he have these degrees? But at some point in the public eye, it seems to not have mattered anymore. Like he sort of has taken credit for a lot of these things. He said them in podcasts, so he's sort of like ostensibly saying this is the case. Or even with Tesla, which you obviously cover and know very well. Like he has this sort of weird battle ongoing with one of the guys that co-founded it, and like constantly.
Well, there's like a whole lawsuit about who was the founder, and now I think the correct way to refer to Musk is as the co-founder, not the founder.
Yep.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about Musk and Los Angeles. We were talking about Elon being this creature of Silicon Valley, his early days with X.com and PayPal and the relationships that he formed, but Musk moved to LA in 2002 to form or to start SpaceX. And then for the next 2 decades, he basically lived in LA and commuted to Silicon Valley during the week to work at Tesla. So what do you think about just Los Angeles as a place, as a culture, and how did it influence Elon as a personality?
Yeah, no, so I should preface this with I am pretty ride or die San Francisco as far as LA versus SF. But I do think that for a number of years now, there's a few things going on. One, for a number of years now, I do think folks in tech have been trying to make LA a tech thing, and there are a bunch of different tech incubators there. There's tech companies that are starting there. There's sort of Hollywood adjacent companies that are still in tech. The creator sort of thing is huge, obviously, for social media companies, and the like creator houses are down there. So it is important, and it is a real thing. I think there's always going to be an SF pull, and it does still feel like the center of tech in a lot of ways, and that's a whole other sort of topic. But LA has been a thing. It's slowly been bubbling up, and more folks have been moving down there as there have been waves of popularity or waning popularity in San Francisco and being here. I also think the pandemic accelerated a lot of this. Folks decided, I don't need to be here. The idea we can work everywhere or anywhere, like we can go wherever we want. And then of course they're retrenching on that. But like LA has been a thing. I think Elon and really a lot of tech scions a lot of the time have a desire to want to be part of this other thing that is enamoring to them. And, it's funny, I knew a CEO, a very famous tech CEO who was like at the Oscars one time, and just no one knew who he was and felt very out of place. And it was like this crazy thing, because if you saw him on the street up here, everyone would be like, oh, good. It was like an obvious person. And I feel like Elon was someone who was not that. He was actually sort of a celebrity here and became a sort of celebrity there. And I think the sort of glitz was very attractive to him. I also think it did influence his thinking of, okay, we don't have to have the Bay Area be the epicenter of everything. And so, like, I do think that culturally shifts how you approach company building. I also think just like being in LA culturally is very different than San Francisco. The vibes are different. You have to drive everywhere. You're thinking about transportation differently.
If you're the CEO of like a car company, LA is where like the auto industry from a design perspective totally evolved. And
Absolutely.
I went to the Peterson Museum a couple months ago, and they were having like all these cyber trucks rolled up, and it was just like I don't know. I'm not a big car person. I'm a public transit person, but it was a reminder that like the auto industry and LA are very much intertwined, as is aerospace.
Totally.
And in the early days of Tesla events, when they would actually invite like mainstream financial journalists to their events, they always had a red carpet at their events. So it was like very much like Hollywood. And a lot of Hollywood celebrities owned Teslas early on. So he very smartly cultivated that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're totally right. Just the early status symbol of Cybertruck is probably not as clean of a narrative now because it's turned into sort of an anti-status symbol. But I do feel like, in some ways, you're exactly right. In the like early Tesla Model S status symbol thing was like very much present, definitely in LA. I totally agree.
Yeah. So he moved to Texas in 2020. You're from Texas originally.
I am, yeah.
I grew up in Maryland, so my sense of Texas is that they really do love him. He's like a wildcatter. Like he very much fits into Texas's perception of itself. But Texas has obviously changed quite a lot in the last couple of decades. Do you see him as being like a Texan now for the long haul? Or talk to me more about Texas growing up there, what it's like when you go back, how you see Elon fitting into the tech scene there.
Yeah. No, well, I can definitely. So what it's like for me is eating a lot of fajitas when I go back. But I do think there are different sort of things that I think sync up with each other. I will say I grew up in Fort Worth. He absconded to Austin, which is its own thing. I think a lot of Texans also see Austin as very different than the rest of Texas. Some folks call it like an island within Texas as far as a liberal bastion. But I do think that some of his later political beliefs tend to jibe with Texans. You know, I think he's obviously leaned heavily into the immigration sort of stuff, or anti-immigration stuff, I should say. And that has been like a political hot button for a lot of folks in Texas. But I also think that even on a more basic level, his grandiosity and his sort of larger than life presence, I think resonates with a lot of folks in Texas.
Yeah. And I think it makes sense that SpaceX is there. I mean, NASA is based in Houston, and if you're going to colonize Mars, you need to be close to NASA in order to do your rocket project. And so, yeah, he's got a lot. He's got Austin, he's got Boca Chica, so he's in Texas quite a bit. But now the AI industry is basically headquartered in San Francisco and in London. So do you ever see a scenario where Musk has to moves back to California? I mean, he probably wouldn't because of his own personal wealth and tax reasons. But now we're in this interesting scenario where if the future is AI, the AI is here. I mean, that's what San Francisco is riding on.
No, you're totally right. It's funny. I was thinking about his reasons for leaving and the reasons for coming back. And I do think there was something real. There were a few things in the beginning of there was the tax burden stuff that, you guys had wrote about, not having a permanent residence anywhere, but in California specifically freed him of hundreds of millions of dollars in tax burdens, I believe.
Yeah.
So that was real. But I also think there were vibes of everyone was just kind of getting out. Miami and Austin were two places that everyone was by everyone, I mean a very specific portion of tech people who were I need to get out of here. I need to go find something fun. And sort of right-leaning or libertarian tech people specifically, I think wanted to go to those other places because they had their own vibes on what San Francisco was becoming. 4 years later, people are coming back. To exactly what you said, AI is, whether you like it or not, the epicenter of it really in a talent way is here and in London, and then in Canada as far as the feeder schools there.
Toronto.
Yeah, Toronto. Yeah. But there's OpenAI as the epicenter, and then a bunch of startups that have cropped up around it that are all AI focused are there, and it's becoming a real talent center. And look, I think that, at a very specific place, and that coupled with bosses of big companies, which are very invested in AI, whether it's Meta or Google or Apple now or Salesforce, whoever, are demanding, not even asking, demanding return to offices for 3 to 4 day week minimum sort of thing, right? So
perish the thought.
yeah, I know, right? You see me in my cave here, which I never leave. But I think this is the draw that is not only gonna bring him back, but others realize that you can't, as much as they might want, you can't escape the Bay Area for a lot of the premium talent that they want, especially in this very specialized field of AI where crazy salaries are being commanded by folks who work on machine learning and computer vision that you can't always find in many other places in the world.
So I could talk to you for hours, but now we're going to move on to our last segment, which is a fun game that we invented for you where we're calling it Know Your Innovator. And I'm going to read you a quote, and you have to tell our listeners, is this a Travis Kalanick quote or an Elon Musk quote?
Oh my God, that's so good. Okay, I love it. Let's do it.
Okay. The first one is a little bit of a giveaway. Being super pumped gives us superpowers, turning the hardest problems into amazing opportunities to do something great.
That is my boy, Travis Kalanick.
Yeah, remind us, where does that quote come from? I know, obviously, it's the name of your awesome book, but was this written down? It was like the corporate coda for Uber in its early days?
Totally. So in, I want to say 2012 or so, he did this huge retreat where he took all of his employees to Las Vegas and very big debauchery across the city and had a bunch of fun. And Jay-Z and Beyonce performed on stage. Jay-Z was in the crowd. It was like the epitome of what you would think of tech opulence in a corporate retreat. And amidst that, he holds this sort of speech moment where he introduces, it's actually crazy long. He introduces a list of, I want to say 14 values that people just had to adopt when they were working at Uber. And it was a bunch of different words and phrases, but one of them that stood out to me in my reporting, which was my favorite, which is super pumped. And it's just this idea of being super pumped to approach everything and go into it super hard. And it has stuck with me for a very long time. And I think will probably never go away at this point.
I know, it's such a great book title too.
Thank you.
Okay. Next quote, I think we have a duty to maintain the light of consciousness to make sure it continues into the future.
Okay, that has to be Elon, right?
That is Elon.
Okay, good.
Next one, as an entrepreneur, I try to push the limits, pedal to the metal.
Ooh, that's good. Elon.
That's actually Travis.
Oh, I knew there was Travis vibes there, but the car, okay.
Close vibes.
Yeah.
Pedal to the metal, yeah, that tripped you up. If you get up in the morning and think the future is going to be better, it is a bright day. Otherwise, it is not.
That's Elon, right?
That is Elon.
Okay.
Yeah.
That feels very light and dark, compared to his mood sort of thing, he's kind of, depending on what time you get him, he can either be optimist or super doomer.
Yeah, whether he's dark Elon or optimistic Elon, for sure. When you were talking about, I will lose my sanity for real, that's when it's time to move on.
All right, that feels like Travis.
That's Travis. Yep.
The for real gave it away for me.
This one I love. Do not have sex with another employee unless A, you have asked that person for that privilege and they have responded with an emphatic yes, I will have sex with you. And B, the two or more of you do not work in the same chain of command.
I know exactly what this is from. This is Travis, and it was a company-wide email before a different retreat trying to...
In Miami, right?
In Miami.
This is like the Miami?
That's right.
Yeah.
Trying to, I guess, be a responsible boss, and I'm not sure it quite worked.
And this must have been an email that then leaked immediately?
Yeah, it did not leak immediately. It leaked when all the drama was happening in 2017 and the knives were out for him. I remember that specifically. So someone hung on to it for, God, it had to have been 5 to 7 years and then decided to leak it when he was on the ropes.
Amazing. Last quote, life is too short for long-term grudges.
That feels like an ironic Elon quote. Because
That's right.
I was going to say I can't imagine him saying that, but also it's perfect if he says that.
Right. Although Musk seems to have quite a bit of grudges going on these days.
No, totally. That's why I just sort of feel it's okay, man, you can say that and it does not match up to reality with me, with what you're actually performing. So anyway, I'm glad I got it. That's funny.
Mike Isaac, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rayhan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rayhan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from Jeff Grocott, Antonia Mufarech, and Arafat Jalasho. Our supervising producer is Magnus Hendrickson. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Sugiura. Brendan Francis Newnham is our executive producer, and Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts. A big thanks to our supporter, Joel Weber. I'm Max Chapkin. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help others find it, and we will see you next week.